Good morning and welcome everyone to the Nexans and Seaway7 Supplier and Subcontractor Engagement event. This is something that is jointly hosted by the Virginia Maritime Association and the Hampton Roads Alliance and their offshore wind division. And so we're very excited to have you attending this today. This is really an opportunity as we look at the offshore wind market here on the East Coast and in Virginia. Many of you have been involved in these discussions with other suppliers and developers, but we wanted to make sure that you had another opportunity to engage directly with the Nexans and Seaway7 team to hear about more of their needs and services that you may be able to provide as local companies here. So today, Nexans and Seaway7 will present information about their companies, their potential needs for the CVOW commercial project, and how you can become part of this. We will have two events. There's one today and there's one on the 18th. So if you think that there's someone after you hear this today that needs to be here, make sure that you reach out to your network and your colleagues and make sure that anyone who couldn't make it today, that they know that there will be a second event on Tuesday the 18th for you to participate in. I also want to remind you that we do have the Q&A function. So after the presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions both to the Nexans and Seaway7 teams about their supply chain and procurement process. So feel free to utilize the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. With that, I just want to quickly introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm Will Fadue. I'm the Vice President of the Virginia Maritime Association, and we are Virginia's 100-year-old premier maritime supply chain or maritime trade association, excuse me, that really represents the entire maritime supply chain with over 450 member companies. When you look at ocean carriers to the terminal operators, trucking, inland transportation, warehousing, et cetera, and the actual importers and exporters of cargo. And as of late, I've been very heavily involved in the offshore wind space around the supply chain, making sure that we connect Virginia's maritime companies with these offshore wind opportunities as well. I'd like now to turn it over to Matt Smith, who's our co-partner in this with the Alliance.
Thanks, Will. My name is Matt Smith. I'm the Director of Offshore Wind for the Hampton Roads Alliance. We are the Hampton Roads Region's economic development organization. So we offer services in a variety of areas, but we have a specific focus, which is my job, on attracting the supply chain of the U.S. offshore wind industry to Hampton Roads and connecting businesses in our region to opportunities in that supply chain. So we've been hosting a series of education events about the offshore wind industry related to the Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Project. And we're excited today to be able to connect you with two of the global leaders in offshore wind, Seaway7 and Nexans, and happy to have them present the work that they may be doing in the region and talk about their companies. So with that, I'll turn it over to the teams at Seaway7 and Nexans. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you guys. Thank you, Matt and Will. I really appreciate you guys lining this up and helping us getting this arranged. I think this is a critical kind of first step in exploring opportunities. And me trying to share here. Why am I having trouble all of a sudden? Sorry. So somehow my presentation is not available to be shared. Sorry. I think here we go. We got it. Okay, good. So again, I appreciate you guys lining this up for us. I think this is a critical first step in engaging the local market. This is a great new industry in the U.S. and one that's super dynamic and evolving every day. So it's important that when we start, working with these developers, that we have a good understanding of the local supply chain capabilities and how we can contribute to that local economy. So what our intention here today is first I should introduce myself. So my name is Zach Skelton. I'm business development manager here for Seaway7. We have multiple colleagues from both Seaway7 and Nexans on the call, which we'll kind of introduce as we go through this presentation. What our intention is what I like to do is just kind of have a quick overview. I think a lot of people are familiar with what's going on, but it's always good to address the evolving kind of development in the U.S. market. So I'll go over just a quick introduction. I'll pass it over to my colleagues in Nexans to go through a very generalized view of what the major wind farm components look like, what they consist of, and then we'll go over a little more specific role of where we intend on providing our services in the Virginia area, and then we'll go to an introduction to who Nexans is, who Seaway7 is, and then go to a more supply chain study and show you some pictures and get you some, so you can get some ideas on what kind of requirements we will have and what kind of engagement we'll have, and then what the next steps will be, so we can progress this a little further. So what I want to do here is just kind of show what the general. So this is what the U.S. market's kind of looking like. This shows the different state ambitions, their goals, and a published timeline of how they intend to get there. So at the bottom, you see that in 2018-19, there was the demonstrator project was established in Virginia. That project was awarded. It was finalized and installed last year. And then the state of Virginia has a target of 2,500 megawatts by 2026. So some states are a little more specific than the others, but what I just wanted to show here is that there is a substantial demand. There are targets set by the states, there are power demands set by the states, and then we have to help them get to meet those goals. So the next one is a map, and this kind of shows the eastern seaboard and what the lease areas look like right now. And this is where they're going to be developing in order to meet those state demands. So in green are all the leases where there's a financial mechanism secured. So there's already a power purchase agreement to a state to procure the energy that produced in that lease area. The yellow ones are lease areas that have been secured, and developers have the right to develop on that parcel of property, but there has not been a financial mechanism secured yet. And then in the orange and red are identified potential lease areas, and that's predominantly in the New York Bight that have been identified for potential use. So I think there'll be some lease rounds going on later this year where we'll have multiple developers bidding on that to help meet some of the requirements and demands for the state of New York. So this is a pretty dynamic area. This graphic is updated a couple times a year with the evolving kind of market that we're seeing right now. Sorry, did you have a question? All right, so I've also put some of the main ports here, so you can see New Bedford and New London and New York, New Jersey, Trade Point Atlantic, and the Port of Virginia as we kind of move down south. Those are the major kind of the identified ports. That's where a lot of the infrastructure will be developed. There will be major investments in that area, in those areas, likely to accommodate some of these large components and offshore operations. So I will come back later, but for now, I'll hand this over to Runar, who can kind of explain what are the major components of a wind farm.
Yes, thank you, Zach. So my name is Runar Hafskjold. I am a tender manager with Nexans, and I am based here in Oslo in Norway. The components of a wind farm. First of all, this is then an offshore wind farm. I dare say that the development of offshore wind farms in the later years have been almost explosive, and I think we're still developing the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. The major difference is, of course, fixed or bottom-fixed structures, like the wind farms that we have developed so far, but they're also moving to develop floating wind farms with additional technological challenges that they have. So what we'll focus on is, of course, the bottom-fixed structures, because that is how the Dominion era is being developed. So if we start from the generator or generating part, you will have the turbines. I'll also link it to how the Dominion contract is being set up. So the wind turbines are normally provided by a selection of very few suppliers around the world. Again, there's been a huge development over the later years with respect to efficiency per turbine. I think now it's 8 or 9 megawatts, and it's only a few years ago it was 5. Dominion has 100 and currently I think 189 turbines. It's a huge project. Each turbine is connected to an offshore substation, where basically the power is converted or transformed to a higher voltage for export to the shore. So the yellow or the orange cables we call inter-array cables, and those are those connect all the turbines in a network to the offshore substations. On Dominion we have 3 offshore substations, and they contain transformers and electrical termination equipment, and also cranes and laydown areas. And then it goes through the offshore export cable. That is normally a longer distance. For Dominion, the distance is about 60-70 kilometers, depending on which substation it goes to. These cables, both the inter-array cables and the export cables are normally protected, so they have to be buried into the sea bottom to protect them from anchoring or trawling or impact from above. And there's a requirement of a level of protection that we have to comply with. And then when you reach the shore, then it's normally shallower water, and to maintain the low impact with respect to the environment, it's almost always the last section is almost always laid in ducts or tunnels under the shore, and these can be drilled through horizontal duct drilling, or it could be trenched, depending on what requirements we would have for that area. And so for Dominion, the requirement is that it is horizontal duct drilling, HDD. And then it goes to a transition joint pit. This is where you kind of end the offshore cable and connect to the onshore cable, because the properties are different for the offshore cable and the onshore cables, mainly because of the different environments they are in. And then there is normally an onshore substation, an onshore substation, where the power is again transformed and it's connected to the grid. Yeah, basically, that's the components of a wind farm. So just a few words on what kind of work that goes into this. Of course, it's the installation work of the turbines and their supports. They are fabricated in yards around the world, in locations around the world, and installed. And then you have the supply and installation of the cables. So the export cables are high voltage cables, and the inter-array cables are lower voltage cables. So they're different technology due to this, and you would have normally different suppliers of the two parts of types of cables. And like Nexans and others, we specialize in supply and installation of these export cables. And we have then our factories and our installation tools. We have 2 vessels and we have protection tools that crawl on the sea bottom to protect the cables. All of this is tuned and rigged towards the most efficient manufacturing and installation of these export cables. I'm not sure if that covers it, Zach, or and we could go on and revert to details later on. Yeah, I can take this one as well. So, as I mentioned, for these projects, these offshore substations are manufactured in yards, normally not part of the cable installer and manufacturer scope, but it is installed by highly competent installers. The wind turbines are again another procurement package from the customer, and in this case, the Dominion has organized the contract so that transport and installation of the substations and the foundations for the wind turbines is combined with the supply and installation of the cables, inter-area cables and export cables. The consequence of this is that it's a huge contract for anyone. So of course, it allows players to work together and to combine efforts to be able to meet the scope that is asked from the customer. In general, as I said, huge project is 500 kilometers of export cables, and I think it's more than 380 kilometers of inter-area cables. And in addition to these substations, they have 189 foundations, as mentioned. Okay. Yeah, I can go on about presenting Nexans. So Nexans is a large company and providing electrical solutions. We have different business areas. We supply electrical solutions to buildings and aircraft and automotive industries. Our business is submarine and land systems. So we provide high voltage cables to grid or to grid networks and to wind farm developers like Dominion. We have factories in 3 countries: in Japan, in Futsu, in Norway, in Halden, and in Charleston or Goose Creek in the States. Our main office for SLS is in Norway, in Halden. The main office for the Nexans group is in Paris, in France. Our SLS business area has about 2,200 employees. Yep. Yeah. So this is a picture of the whole cycle of delivery. So we do all the design, we do all the qualification testing that is required for the supply of cables like this. Of course, this represents the infrastructure of the network utility operator. So they are extremely conservative and really focused on the lifespan of the cable and the risk for failure in the supply. So that's why the testing requirements are extremely stringent. And the same goes, of course, with manufacturing. Our plants have very high standards in HSE and cleanliness when it comes to manufacturing, because we produce hundreds or thousands of kilometers of cable, and they all have to be of the same predictable condition. So then we do transport and installation. as mentioned, we have one vessel that we've had for several years, and the second vessel is actually on sea trials as we speak. The second vessel is state of the art. It's very high capacity for both transport and laying. We use different tools when we protect our cables. We could either plow them down into the sea bottom by towing them after the vessel, or we could use a jetting tool, which is basically ROV that flushes the cables into the sea bottom. All this depends on the conditions of the sea bottom. We also do land installation. But for land installation, we of course do the installation, but the civil works connected to it, we normally source with local suppliers. We can come back to that later. Okay. And I think I will hand it over to you, Zach. I think you have to unmute, maybe.
All right. Now I think you can hear me.
Yeah, no.
So then is run through an introduction of Seaway and Subsea7 in our corporation before we then get into the meat and potatoes and start talking about some of the supplied works and requirements we have for the supply chain. So we are a company. I'm based in Providence in Rhode Island. We have our main offices are from a heavy lifting and foundation side. We are based in Holland. From inner array cable proficiency, we have got a location in Germany. Our vessels typically dock in Holland in both Rotterdam and a port called Eemshaven. We also have a good contingency of people in the larger Subsea7 office in Aberdeen and in Paris and in Houston as well. So we have a project-based office in the Far East in Taipei and Kuala Lumpur, and I think that's our general footprint for just Seaway7. So Seaway7 is part of is the renewables and heavy lifting division or focused group for a larger company called Subsea7 that makes up, the Subsea7 organization makes up over 9,000 employees. And they are focused on oil and gas infrastructure and development there. So these are kind of a snapshot of our assets. In the top left is Seaway Strashnov. She's a 5,000 ton DP3 crane vessel. She's utilized in installing foundations, where those are fixed bottom jackets or monopiles. She can install floating structures, any kind of fixed foundation she's more than capable of doing. In the top middle is the Uden. She's a 2,500 ton moored crane vessel. She's currently working in the Taiwanese market right now. And in the top right-hand corner is actually an oil and gas focused, she's the 7 Borealis. She is a pipe layer. She lays infrastructure globally, but she's got a big crane and we've utilized her before to assist on transition piece installs. She's able to do in this picture some substations and jackets as well. The bottom right is the Seaway Amory. She is the one that completed the inner array and export scope for the CVOW demonstrator project last year. So she laid the cables between the 2 turbines and then laid the export up to that conduit that Runar mentioned in his presentation. And then somebody else did the cable pull in and short pull and burial once it hit the ground. On the bottom left is another cable layer. She is was previously an oil and gas umbilical layer that's been retrofitted to be able to help us address some of the demanding or the increasing needs in the inner array market. And then the middle one is a walk to work vessel that's under our flag. We'll likely use some U.S. vessels for this kind of work. That is kind of a commissioning vessel. So once you've laid the foundations, laid the cables, you have to do the cable pull-ins. You reroute that. You route the cable within the transition piece, do termination and testing within there, and that is all done by the walk-to-work vessel once the installation vessels have left the field. I've got some neat pictures here that I wanted to share, not necessarily wanting to talk about backlog and fact, our track record, but we've been in the renewables business for over 10 years now. And here's, I just think, some interesting pictures showing foundation installations on the top, showing transition piece integrations. In the middle, you can see a substation in the background with the wind farm. The bottom pictures, the bottom left is a very large monopile. We'll see even larger ones in the U.S. in the years to come. And the bottom right, those are pin piles. So the jackets will be set on. They have a four-legged jacket would be set on multiple pin piles to set them in place and ground in place. So it's good to see just the size and scale of these things. The next one is more cable related, just kind of showing we've connected over 500 turbines. We've laid 1,600 kilometers of inter-array cables at this point, with quite a bit more backlog. So we've done this for a while. We're very confident in our abilities, and so I think that kind of leads into the next question: is how we can incorporate local content. Something I should have mentioned on the initial slides were, this demand is coming. I think we'll see the first commercial wind farm installed in 2023. And it will be busy up and down the East Coast for the next several years. So it's important to create these engagements and understand who is out there and what they can supply and help us in assisting us and work with us now during these tender phases, these development phases, so we can be better positioned to the clients up front. I mean, we're engaging now for 23, 24, 25 opportunities. It's important we have that interaction with you guys here on the call. So unfortunately, I can't map out the supply chain very easily. I mean, there are multiple different disciplines. You have, goods and services. You have consumables that are procured through different suppliers. You have more complex procurement and service contracts that are usually executed by our SCM specialists. There are category specific. There are different work packages. And so we have a different organization. So what we've done in the letter that hopefully you've received, and what we will show again at the end of this presentation, is we have an email that you can reach out to us, and we'll go through that process later, but it will touch all of the different disciplines. So whether you want to provide rigging services to more complex subcontracting packages, we can make sure we get you to the right people. So what I'll do now is, this is a bullet point list of some identified items that we think that we can procure locally, and we would like to kind of engage with the local market. It's important to probably say that, we haven't won this yet, that there's been very few of these major commercial projects awarded. So the timing is now. It's good to start that engagement now. It's going to be, it's going to be a process. We're going to have discussions and understand what the capabilities are and where they fit for each area over the course of the next few years. So what we've compiled is a few pictures at this moment, just to give you some exposure, and then we can start that further engagement later. So what from a Seaway7 side, we install foundations, substations, and inter-array cables. So the pictures are all going to be associated with those different packages. On the top left is barge grillage and sea fastening. These monopiles will be sent to a marshalling yard. And from that marshalling yard, they have to be loaded out onto barges, which is kind of showing the bottom left corner. You can load the monopiles out on a barge, either via crane or SPMTs in a roll-on fashion, depending on the quayside and size of the monopiles and crane capabilities. These monopiles can be anywhere between, depending on the project on the East Coast, talking generalities, probably 14 to 2,000 metric tons a piece. So trailers could be away, cranes could be away, but we always need a cradle. So when we say grillage and sea fastening, these monopiles need to be sat on these barges, and that right there is probably 250 tons of steel built to hold these monopiles. We would like to be able to procure services to fabricate those items, integrate them onto the deck of the barge, so that we can move them out to the field and pick them up and install them. On the top right shows some fabrication works of cable storage tanks. So a lot of these cables, while some of them can be produced in the US, a lot of them are still, until the market catches up, a lot of them are being fabricated overseas. And so if that's the case, then they would come on a vessel like you kind of see in the picture up top right. When those cables arrive, they need to be transpooled to the quayside, they need to be put into storage tanks until an as-needed basis till the vessel comes alongside and brings them offshore to be able to install them. So those are hopefully give you a little better idea of the size and scale there. Transition pieces. So we've mentioned the foundation consists of typically, if it's a monopile, it'll be a monopile with a transition piece on the top. That transition piece is kind of what connects the foundation to the tower and the blades that come later. So those transition pieces, when they're installed, they need to be weather protected. There's different ways to do that. I have a picture later on where you can see an aluminum structure that covers and protects the transition piece. In this case, there is more of a simplified tarpaulin version that's strapped down, and usually there's going to be a hatch so you can access it. There's a lot of cables. There are some critical electrical components in there, so they do need to be protected from the elements. I move on to marine support. There's quite a bit of needs here. I can start in the top left-hand corner. There's quite a bit of surveys, whether those are pre-lay surveys, post-lay surveys, unidentified or unexploded ordnance surveys. There's quite a bit of survey requirements to be had, and I think those are more than I can go into in this conversation, but there's a need there, and I encourage you to reach out if you think that you can supply services. Med-ocean weather services, I'll go kind of clockwise. I think there's a lot of weather critical items. There's a lot of time sensitive items. We need to know what the weather looks like on a local basis. Having those services locally are definitely going to be in need for a project this size. Guard vessels on the top right. Those are vessels that we would maintain in the field to keep out other boaters or other marine activities. So as you lay that cable or as you lay that foundation, there has to be a sense of space maintained. And so there's usually some guard vessels that are in the region to kind of make sure that people know that construction activities, just like you would see on a highway or civil works, you would have to kind of cordon off that area so you don't have people wandering in. Supply, if I go down to the middle right, the supply and support, there's multiple vessels needed to bring out supplies, whether those are food ships, those are critical supplies. It can be an array of things. We need a nice big back deck to be able to move from the quayside, from the port facilities to the offshore installation site. The one right next to the big back deck kind of offshore supply vessel is one with a crane. So there's also some needs for vessels with a knuckle boom crane to be able to assist on some different other scopes. CTVs, those are walk to work vessels. So these CTVs are going to be important to transfer crew. Those are crew transfer vessels, bring people from the port out to the sites and out to the installation vessels for crew changes. This is a long operation, and there'll be multiple crew changes there. Tugs, there's quite a bit of tug movement, whether those are inshore tugs, offshore tugs, mooring assist tugs. So there's quite a bit of marine assets needed there, marine supply needed there. We'll go to the transportation barges. Those transportation barges is kind of what you saw on the previous slide that would handle the monopiles. That's how you get the monopiles. That's how you get the transition pieces out from the port to the site. And then I get back around to the protected species observers, PSOs, and endangered animals monitoring. We need to have those services on the vessel to make sure that we comply by any endangered mammals services or criteria. This one is more on onshore works and supply. So I'm going to start on the top right-hand side, the site facilities. So that's a rendering of what a laydown yard could look like, showing monopiles and transition pieces there. It's not necessarily what it's going to look like in the US or in Virginia for that matter, but it's probably a good indication of the size required. So for that size, you need cranes. There's going to be a substantial amount of cranes. There's going to be crane matting. There's going to be stevedoring services. There's power generation and light towers. I also have waste management at the bottom right. You know, the installation vessel itself stays in the field, and it plans on staying in the field for months at a time. So there's quite a bit of stewarding, catering services. The bottom left-hand corner does show an actual kind of cafeteria room in some of these vessels. There's a lot of food. There's a lot of people that are, you know, some of these vessels can accommodate from some of the supply vessels 60 to 80 to over 200 personnel on board. And so you got to feed an army. With that army comes waste management as well. So those are, we would envision, you know, these kind of waste skips to be sent back and forth, grocery supplies, stores sent back and forth on some of the supply vessels I showed on the previous slide. And then other services and supply. So on the top right, that's another picture of a transition piece cover. So that's a TP cover. That's more of an aluminum, more of a hardy structure for a different environment, but it's another way you can look at it. We need rope access services. So once we've laid that line and laid and installed the transition piece, there's a tower team that comes in there that usually hangs from ropes and are pulling that cable up and moving it throughout that transition piece, getting it to that box and doing the termination and testing. There's a good demand level for those. Cargo carrying containers, baskets, these are on the back of the OSV. So this is where you're moving product back and forth from the field to in the yard. So usually those are, you know, DNV certified containers. They're open tops. Sometimes they're closed. Sometimes they're smaller baskets, waste skips, refrigerated units. You have all kinds of items there. Rigging material, shackles, slings, come-alongs. You know, there's all kinds of rigging items needed. Synthetic rope, steel wire rope. There's all kinds of support needed there. So there's a good rigging material shop, a good partner in being able to get to move pretty quickly is usually quite important for our work. I wrote non-destructive testing services. Those can be done onshore and offshore. A lot of the NDE works will need to be done on the barges, and when you're putting those cradles on there, the grillage and sea fastening. The top left-hand corner is one of our vessels with a good picture. You can see the size of the crew, and this is applicable to a lot of these big construction vessels offshore. That's a lot of people. There's a lot of quality. There's a lot of health. There's safety and environment services that are needed onshore and offshore. So those are definitely worth mentioning. And then professional engineering. So we do envision the need for some PE support services, and those are hopefully we find people based in Virginia for those kind of items. I think that wraps up the Seaway scope. I do want to say this does not cover everything. There are other services, but I think this kind of provides a really good flavor of some of the main items that we would look to procure. So if you didn't see some of the items, some of your strengths or services or supply within these slides, I would encourage you still to reach out and let us know what you can do. There may be there's a piece for there's a piece for everybody here. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Nexans.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. My name is Esther Stephensen. I'm head of the Tender and Project Procurement Department in Nexans Subsea and Land Systems Business Group. So I'm reporting to our CPO, and I'm here today with two of my team members, our category manager for marine scope, Masoud, and our tender and project purchasing manager, Henning. In the procurement, our responsibility is all the interaction with suppliers, all the business commercial support. It's to know our suppliers, know our markets, and the point of contact towards all the suppliers during a tender and the project. Let's move on to the next slide to present our scope of work. I will leave it to Henning and Masoud to present it.
Okay, good morning, colleagues from America. My name is Masoud and I'm the category manager for marine operations generally, working under procurement department. what do we do in our procurement department is to structure the projects and the tenders for the marine operations. We do not only produce the cable, but we also lay and protect the cable. So after the cable vessel leaves the facility, our work starts from site to site. This includes many types of vessels which guides the main vessel, or they guard the vessel according in front against the other fishing activities or related activities, ocean tugboats, ship agents, etc., and also diving services for the offshore works. They are not only engineering technical stuff. You should also consider about the custom and site and port operations, site security facilities, also warehouses, since we have also repair operations where we store the cable and related equipment in order to proceed the repair process. Also, Nexans has a great care about the nature of the sea. So according to the authorities and the client requests, of course, we have to take care about the sea animals and the sea structures. Therefore, before the operations, prior to the operations, we have to handle the survey in order to check the bottom and in order to not to damage any species. Also, these surveys are requested to choose the best route to lay the cable. Can we move to the other slide, please? Okay. For the prior to the operation, Nexans requires some preparatory works such as grapnel, UXO services for the unexploded objects, and prelay surveys. Then we lay the cable and we have to protect it. We use concrete mattresses or rocks to install on them in order to stabilize the cable, not to move it. So the concrete mattresses and the rocks are provided from suppliers on site. And any vessel-related activities such as guarding or crew transfer or support vessels to the main vessel will be procured by our category. Can you move one more, please? Generally, Zach mentioned many of these items, but I just want to mention one more time. Weather services is quite critical in our operations because the main factor which decides or affects every decision taken on the sea comes from the weather services. We generally require 3 times per day during the operation. It affects very critically our operations. And barges and transport barges are needed for the shallow waters in order to pass the main vessel with a high security. So every operation during the marine works, we have to give a great care in order to minimize or eliminate every risk. We can pass this one as well. Also, you should not only consider the offshore works because many of the works start with onshore. Therefore, we require horizontal direct drilling operation, which is a very huge and important engineering technical operation. And also the transition joint areas where we connect the cable and distribute the energy to the population. So you should not consider only the offshore works, but also the on-site works, which starts at least 1 year before the main operation. So the project starts with the on-site works before the offshore works. So these are the things I would like to mention, but I prepared a keyword list for you guys so you can keep in mind. The main keywords for the protection or marine installation works, you can consider vessels, concrete matrices, rocks, site custom and port operations support, sea surveys, horizontal direct drilling, QHCE, diving services, turntables, cable storage areas, and metal fabrications. These are the main keywords that you have to consider, or you can share with your network and to see if any potential cooperation possible with us and you guys. So these are my areas. I would like to pass to Astrid, back to you again, or who's taking the lead now?
Yes, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so now you have an overview of the project, all the upcoming projects and the scope of work for which we are currently looking for suppliers. Keep in mind, it's not only suppliers for the Virginian project, but also for all the other upcoming US projects. So we are still at the beginning of the engagement of new suppliers. We are looking for suppliers to all this scope of work, but there may be other scopes of work for the upcoming projects as well. So if you are interested in working together with us, it's time to reach out to us, and we will put you on our list of suppliers for the upcoming projects. During the rest of if you go on back, during the rest of the year, we will have some one-to-one meetings with the relevant key suppliers. If you just go back to the previous slide. And then afterwards, we will start shortlisting when we have made our purchasing strategy for this Virginia project. We will start the qualification of the relevant suppliers for this specific project. There might be other projects coming up at the same time, we will see. But we will start to qualify suppliers, select the most relevant suppliers, send RFQs out, evaluate the offers, and select the suppliers. And then we expect the execution to start in 2024, where we will award the subcontractors and suppliers for the scope of work. So if you move on to the next, that if you want to reach out to us, want to get in contact with us, it's to find the letter we sent to you, list your potential scope and what you would be interested in. So if we go to the last slide, please provide following in the email a subject line with what kind of scope or scopes you're interested in and your company name, and then give us some more information about your company, your capabilities, what kind of products or services you can provide, if you have a relevant track record, any certificates that might be relevant for us, some context details where you are based, and the diversity qualifications if you have. So please, if you're interested in getting to know us better, supporting us in the Virginia and other upcoming projects, please reach out to us, Henning from Nexans and Gia from Seaway7. So now it's time for questions.
All right, well, I want to thank you all very much for those presentations. Hopefully those of you who are attending and watching along with us found that it's insightful. We made sure that we worked pretty hard to hopefully answer most of your questions in the actual presentation. That's always the best way to do it. Hopefully you saw the contact information. That is the most important thing as well. And a lot of this information you can also find on the Hampton Roads Alliance website. They have a page set up for this where you can go and if you miss the contact details or anything like that. I also want to remind the attendees again that you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. And then also to our guest panelists here, you can also type in answers as well. So if you open the Q&A box yourself, you can see those questions and answer some of them kind of as we go along. That allows us to kind of have a two-way approach of answering some live and also some that can be answered in the chat. So with that, I have some questions here that came in from the audience that I'd like to throw out there. So right now, which components are looking to be sourced or manufactured here in the US when it comes down to, you know, transmission cables, foundations, etc.?
I'll start. At this point, the US does not have the manufacturing capabilities to build the monopiles. The size of the steel, the quality of the steel and thickness of the steel are not available at mills at the moment. So I think that's going to change in the next few years, and we should see a development of that capability within the US. But for the time being, monopiles are all coming from Europe. Transition pieces you can build. There is some capability in the US. There's assembly capabilities in the US, so that's kind of ongoing. At this point, you know, in this project for the foundations, it is a T&I contractual model, so those components are free issued to us. But there are other opportunities out there where we can see an EPCI solution gaining steam. And I'll leave it to talk to Nexans that mentioned about the cables.
Hey, Emmanuel, I see you on us.
Hey, hi. Yes, very good point, Zach. You know, we are at the beginning of the U.S. offshore wind industry in the U.S., and so as every industry, the supply chain has to be put together. There are plans for monopile facilities in New Jersey, transition pits in New York. Nexans has its facility in South Carolina for export cables. And as the U.S. supply chain grows and the projects are being installed, we will see more and more OEM installing an industrial or operation in the U.S. But so far, we are not a single project have been installed yet. They will be, and so we have to let those projects start. But there are plans to get most of the major components to be made in the U.S. eventually. In our case, Nexans, it's already the case. We are in the U.S.
Okay, thank you. Another question that came in is, let's see here. We talked about how to register as a supplier for Nexans and Seaway7. Can you tell us a little bit more about if there's any requirements or needs for heavy lifting or material handling equipment?
There is at the yard, at the marshalling yard, there will be some cranes, there will be SPMTs, with multiple heavy lifting equipment required. There's also the rigging and slings and shackles and lifting arrangements that would need to be required. Lifting bars, spreader bars may be needed. There are some kind of critical tools for offshore capabilities that will be required too. So if you think you can help with any of those services, we'd be more than happy to engage.
Okay, and to clarify for the audience as well, has Seaway7 and Nexans been contracted by Dominion at this time?
No. So that's why, you know, a lot of these projects, we expect that clients will be awarding a lot of projects along the East Coast this year in 21 and 22. We'd like to get ahead of the game and start this engagement now so we can incorporate the local solutions. But yeah, we're still a little ways away from that. But the timing is now if I can't stress that enough.
All right, thank you for that. Then I have a question for my colleague, Matt, over at the Alliance. So a list of supply chain participants and contact details for other companies, you know, here in Virginia's supply chain that possibly there could be collaboration with for bidding on these tenders as a team. What can you tell us about that, Matt?
Sure, there's a couple answers to that question. At the kind of highest level, I will say that the Business Network for Offshore Wind has a good list of suppliers, and they are based on category. So you can see the types of services those companies offer and where they're located. So that's at the national level. If you're a Virginia company, you should definitely be in contact with me and the Alliance, and hopefully you're participating in a study we're conducting to assess the capabilities of companies in Virginia to participate in the offshore wind supply chain. So our intent, one of many with that study, is to make sure that we are enabling connections between businesses that can work together in our region, and for those businesses to work with suppliers like Nexans and Seaway7. So we are essentially the conduit for a lot of that collaboration, and you can be in touch with me about that. And then obviously with the Business Network for Offshore Wind for companies outside of Virginia.
Excellent. I'd also add, beyond being a part of the various supplier databases that exist out there, either with, like Matt mentioned, the Business Network and Virginia itself, definitely recommend that you all be part of the Alliance and join what they're doing there. Also, part of the VMA, for those of you who are not members, we have a fairly robust offshore wind committee where a lot of these type of team players that you could collaborate with exist. So happy to help out in that way as well.
Will, I have one more plug, I guess, or not plug, but maybe suggestion for a resource, in that the Alliance, in partnership with the Virginia Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy and Old Dominion University, are opening the Virginia Offshore Wind Landing actually next week. And it's a co-working and networking space where companies that are looking to establish a presence in Hampton Roads can do so at a relatively kind of easy and risk-free way, and get connections to the industry, companies like you're talking with here, and others that are in the renewable space, in the offshore wind space, that will be working in our region. So it's a good opportunity to make connections with these important companies.
Excellent. Go ahead, Emmanuel.
Yeah, just wanted to highlight, with all the good work you guys are doing, I just want to highlight to others that, what Nexans Seaway7 needs. People might ask why others will eventually need to. Why we need it in Virginia, eventually we will need it in other states. Of course, every state would like their local supply chain, but guess what will happen if we can't find the proper players in a given state? Guess we are going to call if we find you in Virginia and we thought you are a good supplier or good subcontractors. You're gonna be the next on the list to call on. So think a bit more holistically. On the beginning of the presentation, Zach showed that there are projects all along the East Coast. There are opportunities everywhere. If in a given state, the proper supply chain cannot be found for a given category, we will of course reach out to other local supply chain in other states that we have already vetted. Okay, so broaden your scope. It's not about just one project. First Virginia, there will be more than one project. It's not about only Virginia. Okay.
Excellent. That's a great point. Okay, so question just came in. The contact information presented earlier is not on the Alliance website. Can it be sent out? So I will turn that over to Matt. I'm sure he'll put the contact info on there.
Yes, so the contact information, let's see, is on a specific page related to this event. So we may work to get that in a more prominent location and send out to folks.
Okay. Another one is so more of a technical question for offshore wind in general. So do all ocean-based substations have to be above the water? I'll turn that over to you experts to answer that.
I'll say something, and I know Emmanuel wants to say something. I'll give it to him. But I think the beauty of what has happening in the U.S., and I don't know much about what's being explored globally, but there are no bad ideas. I mean, everything is being explored. This is like really a time of innovation and a time where any opportunity is explored. And so I haven't heard of any subsea substations, but I bet somebody on this panel probably has.
There are talks about that, but right now, I mean, it came from the oil and gas industry. The proven technology is a topside on a foundation. For those substations, they are big. but eventually maybe we will see something, especially when we'll come to floating wind, where people are just scratching their heads for figuring out how am I going to have a floating offshore substation, for which right now there is no answers.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So I'm going to give our attendees one more opportunity. If they have any questions they'd like to submit live via the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. While you are pondering those questions, if you have any, one question I'd like to ask, kind of like as a final question, at least from me, for our panelists here, is what is the most important takeaway that you'd like our attendees to know today from the procurement process we're in right now?
Engage early.
Okay.
Because in the offshore wind industry, we execute things in a couple of years from now. You need the engagement now so we can vet you.
And just to reiterate what Zach was saying earlier as well, even if you couldn't find your business or your line of specialty in this presentation, please don't hesitate to present yourself to us. There might we've been doing this for many years, so we have a pretty good idea of what we need, but there are always things come up. So we might need other services or products that haven't been mentioned. So don't hesitate to present what you have to offer.
Will, I have a follow-up question to Emmanuel's comment. It's about timing, and it was addressed earlier, but I think it would be helpful to have some clarity around that because it's a question that comes up a lot. And I think, let's say we assume that the Seaway7 and Nexans team wins the contract for this project. When will the teams start to do more intensive engagement with local businesses in the Hampton Roads area potentially?
S3, do you want to answer or?
Yeah, I can maybe answer. The question is in somehow now, because it's important for us to start early, and as we have mentioned several times, it's not only for this Virginian project, at least on our side, it's for a lot of upcoming projects, and it will be we have just started in the US market. We need new suppliers. We need to know our market better. So for us, we have already started, and we want to continue our effort towards the US market to get to know it better. So if you have anything you want to offer us, anything you think could be interesting for us for either this project or other projects, please just contact us, and we will call for a one-to-one already. To start the discussions on how to collaborate in the future.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I do want to just kind of add here, and I'm going to beat a dead horse, but the idea about the early engagement. I know that the companies that got involved with the CVAL pilot project, the 2 turbines, they got out there very quickly. You know, they made sure that they took the initiative, they made connections, they worked through the alliance, they worked through the VMA, and made sure that they got connected with the right people. So for those of you who are still attending with us, and you might have thought of either other colleagues or folks that you know that need to be on this call, the great news is, like I said, we're doing a second one. It's going to be exactly the same. It's going to be Tuesday, May 18th. It was in the same email that you got. You could have had the opportunity to register for both. So please feel free to forward that on to your colleagues in your network. We have a week in between so people can get it on their calendars, because both here for the VMA and the Alliance, we're working to make sure that we provide these opportunities to you as the Virginia supply chain system. And that's why our 2 organizations exist, is to help really foster this local supply chain here for the Mid-Atlantic region. So from the VMA standpoint, I want to thank you personally for being here, both our attendees and our panelists, and the great information they've shared. Matt, from the Alliance's standpoint, would you like to wrap things up?
Sure, I echo that thanks both to our panelists and our attendees, and just a couple of bookkeeping notes. We will email out links to the recording to everybody that registered. And on the Alliance webpage, we have an offshore wind dedicated webpage. We will link to this more built out in detail page we've developed for Nexans and Seaway7. Have the recording there, have the presentation there, and contact information there. So please be in touch, and we look forward to maybe seeing you again on the 18th, but please share this with your colleagues and have them attend that session. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you on the 18th. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.